Sell me your Lamborghini now!
Cynthia Wellington, our HOA president, stood at my door at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I refused. 1 hour later, police surrounded my house because she called 911 claiming I threatened to kill her. Her 24-year-old son, Bradley, had tricks I never saw coming, and his HOA president's mother was hiding secrets that would shock our entire neighborhood. 20 years as a federal financial crimes investigator taught me one thing: every 911 call is recorded. My revenge plan took 2 months, but it was worth every second watching her cry in court. Comment where you're watching from if you've ever dealt with nightmare neighbors. The morning sun reflected off the pearl blue paint of my Lamborghini Huracan as I wiped down the hood in my garage. Saturday mornings were my ritual with this car. The last promise I kept to Emily before cancer took her 3 years ago. The scent of car wax mixed with memories of her lavender perfume, the way she'd sit in the passenger seat even when we weren't going anywhere, just talking about life. "Promise me you'll buy it, Vincent," she'd whispered from her hospital bed. "Stop living only for work. Live for joy, too." So I did. This $300,000 machine wasn't just a car. It was a covenant with the woman who taught me that life was more than case files and investigations. The doorbell's aggressive ringing shattered the peaceful morning. Through my security camera app, I watched them for a moment before answering. The woman checked her watch impatiently while the younger man cupped his hands against my garage window, peering inside. I opened the door, coffee still in hand. "Mr. Harrington, I'm so sorry to bother you this early," Cynthia Wellington said, her voice honey-sweet. "We were just heading to the country club, and I noticed your garage was open. This is my son Bradley. He's something of a car enthusiast." Her smile was practiced, political. "When he saw your Lamborghini yesterday, well, he just insisted we stop by before our tea time." Bradley wasn't listening to his mother's pleasantries. His eyes devoured my car with naked hunger. "That's a 2021 Huracan. Right pearl blue man. I need that car," Bradley said, pushing past me slightly to get a better view. "I'll buy it right now. Cash. Whatever you paid plus 50 grand profit." He pulled out his phone like he was ready to transfer money on the spot. "The car's not for sale," I said simply. Bradley's eager expression faltered. "Come on, everything's for sale. Plus 100 the 150. When I shook my head, his tone shifted. "You probably don't even track it. Waste of a machine sitting in some old dude's garage." I felt my jaw tighten, but kept my voice level. "Still not for sale." Cynthia touched her son's arm gently, but her eyes never left mine. "Bradley, please, Mr. Harrington, I apologize for my son's enthusiasm. He just graduated from Princeton. You see, top of his class in finance." She laughed, a tinkling sound that didn't match her calculating gaze. "I promised him something special, and well, your car caught his eye. We're hosting a charity gala next month, and it would mean so much if Bradley could make an entrance in that beautiful machine. Perhaps you'd consider a short-term arrangement. The Wellington family has been part of Willowbrook for 3 generations. We believe in neighbors helping neighbors." The way she emphasized her family name, the casual mention of charity and community, it was all carefully orchestrated. A soft threat wrapped in suburban pleasantries. "I appreciate the offer, but the answer is no," I said, my hand already moving to close the door. Cynthia's smile never wavered, but something flickered in her eyes. "Of course, I understand completely. Sentimental value, I'm sure. My late husband had a vintage Porsche he treasured." She pulled out her phone, typing quickly. "I'm sending you my contact information, just in case. You know how these neighborhoods work. Vincent, may I call you Vincent? We all look out for each other here. HOA meetings, permit approvals, and community support when issues arise. It's what makes Willowbrook special." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Bradley, we should go. The Hendersons are waiting." As they walked to their white Mercedes, she called over her shoulder, "Wonderful meeting you, Vincent. I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of each other." Back in my garage, I saved the security footage to multiple drives and started what my training had drilled into me: document everything. The timestamp showed 7 o'clock a.m. Their car, their license plate, their exact words as best I could recall. My phone had been recording in my pocket the entire time. Another old habit that proved its worth. Bradley had left greasy handprints on my garage window. Instead of wiping them off, I photographed them first. Evidence was evidence. As I backed the Lamborghini deeper into the garage and activated the additional security locks, I couldn't shake the feeling that Cynthia Wellington's parting words weren't a pleasantry. They were a promise. In 20 years of investigating financial crimes, I'd learned to recognize predators. They didn't always wear suits and work in corner offices. Sometimes they wore designer dresses and ran homeowners associations. Monday morning brought an official HOA envelope in my mailbox. Notice of violation commercial vehicle in residential zone. My Lamborghini had been classified as a commercial vehicle due to its excessive value and ostentatious display inconsistent with community standards. The fine was $500 per day until removed. I photographed every page, noting how they'd cited Section 12.4 of the bylaws. That section covered delivery trucks and construction equipment, not personal vehicles. In my 20 years of investigating financial fraud, I'd seen every kind of document manipulation. This was amateur hour, but dangerous in its boldness. She was betting I wouldn't fight back. The Tuesday evening HOA meeting drew a crowd. I arrived at 6:45 p.m. to find the community center parking lot packed. Inside, Cynthia commanded the board table with 4 other members who looked distinctly uncomfortable. Bradley sprawled across 3 front-row chairs, scrolling through his phone with practiced boredom. I took a middle seat and activated my recording app. In a one-party consent state. Perfectly legal. The room buzzed with whispers and pointing fingers. Some neighbors I recognized from morning runs, but most were strangers drawn by the promise of conflict. The woman beside me leaned over. She tried this with the Johnsons last year over their Tesla. They moved. Item 7. The Harrington violation, Cynthia announced at precisely 7 p.m. As you know, maintaining community standards protects all our property values. She let that sink in. The implicit threat that opposing her could cost everyone money. Mr. Harrington's vehicle has generated multiple complaints regarding safety and appropriateness around children. A complete fabrication. My security footage showed I'd driven twice this week, both times under 20 miles per hour. Hands shot up around the room, but Cynthia pressed on. The board takes these concerns seriously. I stood before she could continue her performance. I'd like to address these false complaints with video evidence. The room fell silent. You'll have your chance during public comment. Mr. Harrington, please respect our procedures, she said, her smile sharp as glass. Bradley looked up from his phone. Maybe if you can't afford the fines, you should sell to someone who actually drives, he called out, earning scattered laughter. His mother touched his arm in practiced reproach while suppressing a smile. Though Bradley raises an interesting point about financial burden, the manipulation was elegant. Paint me as either too poor to pay fines or too rich for the neighborhood. Classic double bind. I sat down and continued documenting, my phone capturing every word. When public comment finally opened 30 minutes later, I approached the podium with printed bylaws. Section 12.4 defines commercial vehicles as those used for business purposes. Mine is personal, registered, and insured as such. This interpretation would ban any car deemed too expensive by the board president. I distributed copies, watching 2 board members actually read while Cynthia's jaw tightened. I have security footage disproving any reckless driving claims. I'll share it with any board member who wants the truth. Harrison, the elderly board member, shifted uncomfortably. I'd like to see that footage, he said quietly. Cynthia's mask slipped for just a moment before she recovered. This aggressive tone is exactly the problem, Cynthia said, standing with theatrical concern. We resolve disputes civilly in Willowbrook. She turned to the board. I motion to uphold the violation. All in favor. 3 hands rose immediately, but Harrison kept his down. I want to see the evidence first, he said firmly. The room stirred. Someone had finally challenged her. Cynthia's voice went honey-sweet. Of course. We'll table this pending review. Meeting adjourned. As people filed out, she appeared at my elbow with Bradley trailing behind. You handled yourself well tonight, she said conversationally. Not everyone does. The Johnsons, the Patels, even the city councilman's brother, all found Willowbrook wasn't quite right for them after all. Her tone was friendly, but her eyes were arctic. Funny how that happens. Have a good evening. Cynthia, I said, walking toward the exit. My phone buzzed before I reached my car. The HOA community page showed a photo of me at the podium with the caption, New resident disrupts peaceful meeting, threatens longtime board president. The comments section was already active with accounts I didn't recognize, all pushing the same narrative. Character assassination in real time. I screenshotted everything, adding it to my growing file. Back home, I pulled up my laptop and began searching. Cynthia Wellington's name appeared in property records, business filings, and, interestingly, 3 lawsuits from former neighbors, all settled out of court, all sealed. My investigator instincts hummed. There was more here than a power-hungry HOA president. I made a call to Robert Matthews, my attorney from my federal days. Rob, I need you to pull some records for me. Cynthia Wellington, Willowbrook Estates. I explained the situation while emailing him my documentation. Sounds like extortion dressed up in HOA clothing, he said. Keep documenting. These types always escalate when challenged. As I hung up, my security app alerted me to movement. Bradley's car was idling in front of my house, music pounding. He sat there for 5 minutes, just staring, before peeling out. The message was clear: we're watching you. I saved that footage too. In my experience, criminals always make the same mistake. They got cocky. They pushed too hard. And they always left evidence. Cynthia Wellington was about to learn what happened when you threatened a federal investigator, even a retired one. Wednesday morning at 5:30 a.m., I woke to the sound of spray paint hissing against metal. By the time I reached the garage, the vandal was gone. But their message remained "Leave" in dripping red letters across my Lamborghini's hood. My security cameras captured everything: a figure in a black hoodie, same height and build as Bradley Wellington, same cocky gait I'd observed at the HOA meeting. For a moment, staring at the defaced hood where Emily used to rest her hand during our drives, rage flooded through me so pure it made my vision blur. This wasn't just paint on metal. This was a desecration of a promise. I forced myself to breathe, to channel the fury into something useful. 20 years of investigation work kicked in. I didn't touch anything, instead calling the police while photographing every angle from multiple distances. Officer Martinez arrived at 7 a.m., looking tired and skeptical. "Vandalism report," he said, pulling out his notepad. I showed him the damage, then played the security footage on my tablet. His expression shifted when I mentioned the Wellingtons. "You sure you want to file a report against Cynthia Wellington's son? She's pretty well connected around here." There it was, the soft corruption of small-town politics. "I'm sure," I said. "That's about $15,000 in damage to specialized paint. Grand vandalism, possibly felony level." Martinez sighed but took down the information. As he examined the scene, he muttered, "Between you and me, this isn't the first complaint about that kid, but nothing ever sticks." I filed that detail away. Patterns always told a story. The body shop owner whistled when he saw the damage that afternoon. Pearl blue Lamborghini paint isn't just expensive. It's a 3-week special order. This is going to run at least $18,000 with labor. I had him put everything in writing. By evening, I had 3 estimates, all over $15,000, pushing this firmly into felony territory. Thursday brought another provocation. Bradley appeared at my door at 2 p.m., rocking back on his heels like a boxer ready to throw a punch. "Delivery for you," he said, holding out an envelope while his eyes scanned my property, cataloging changes. "Mom wanted to make sure you got this personally." I took it without touching his hands, noting the oil stains on his fingers, the same type visible on my garage window. "Heard you had some car trouble," he continued, his voice dripping false sympathy. "Real shame. This neighborhood can be dangerous if you're not careful." The letter contained 3 new violations: grass height, security cameras, and disturbing the peace with false police reports. $900 in fines, due within 10 days. Each accusation was demonstrably false, but that wasn't the point. This was financial harassment, death by 1,000 cuts. That evening, I drafted my response to the entire HOA board, laying out the escalating harassment, the vandalism, the false violations. I cited specific bylaws and state statutes, creating a legal record that would matter later. Certified mail, return receipt requested, plus email for digital documentation. Then I called Robert Matthews. "They're accelerating," I told him. "Good," he replied. "Desperate people make mistakes." Friday morning, I shifted tactics. No more pure defense. At the county courthouse, I pulled every public record on Cynthia Wellington. 3 businesses registered to her name, all with HOA board members as partners. 5 lawsuits in 7 years, all settled quietly. One footnote caught my attention. A former neighbor had accused her of harassment after refusing to sell to her preferred buyer. The case was sealed, but the lawyer's name wasn't. Thomas Brennan, still practicing in the next county. I made plans to call him on Monday. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. "You should have just sold the car. This is your last warning." I smiled grimly as I screenshot it. They thought they were hunters. They didn't realize they'd become the prey. That afternoon, I made strategic calls. The local newspaper editor was interested in a story about HOA overreach. A real estate attorney friend confirmed that Cynthia's business partnerships with board members likely violated state conflict of interest laws. The FBI's white-collar crime unit, where I still had contacts, found the pattern of lawsuits and settlements worth noting. I wasn't just building a defense anymore. I was constructing a trap. Cynthia Wellington had operated for years in the shadows of small-town politics, using intimidation and bureaucracy as weapons, but shadows disappeared under proper investigation. Every document she'd filed, every settlement she'd forced, every threat she'd made had left traces. Paper trails were like blood in the water to a trained investigator. Saturday morning, I stood in my garage looking at the vandalized Lamborghini. The body shop had covered it with protective film, but I could still see the red paint underneath. In my federal days, I'd learned that criminals always escalated when cornered. They'd shown their hand with the vandalism, proved they'd cross legal lines when frustrated. Now it was time to frustrate them more. I pulled out my phone and started making videos of the damage. Not for evidence this time, but for something else entirely. Cynthia thought she controlled the narrative in Willowbrook Estates. She was about to discover what happened when you attacked someone who understood that in modern warfare, documentation wasn't just protection, it was ammunition. And I had 20 years of experience in marksmanship. Sunday morning at 8:45 a.m., Cynthia Wellington appeared at my door alone. Through my security monitors, I'd watched her check her makeup twice before approaching. Bradley notably absent. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Every detail calculated to project authority. "Vincent, I think we got off on the wrong foot. May I come in? I have a proposition that could solve everything." Her voice carried that particular tone of someone used to their suggestions being treated as commands. I stepped aside, my phone already recording in my pocket. She settled on my couch like she was granting me an audience in my own home, her eyes cataloging every detail of my living room, probably calculating property values and searching for leverage. "I'll be direct," she said, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. "Bradley made unfortunate choices. Young men and their tempers. You understand. I'm prepared to cover all damages to your vehicle, plus $50,000 for your inconvenience. In exchange, you drop the police report and sell Bradley the Lamborghini at market price." She pulled out her phone, showing a banking app with her finger hovering over the transfer button. "I can transfer the first payment immediately. Cash, no questions asked." The casual way she said it told me she'd done this before, bought her way out of Bradley's messes with other people's silence. I let the silence stretch between us, watching her confidence flicker like a candle in the wind. "That sounds like bribery to cover up a felony." "Cynthia," I said finally. Her smile remained fixed, but something dangerous shifted in her eyes. "It sounds like neighbors being practical," she replied, her voice soft as silk wrapping around a blade. "You know, Vincent, code enforcement can find violations in any home. Sometimes they even find things the homeowner didn't know were there. Shocking what turns up in garages these days, especially when anonymous tips come in about suspicious packages or substances." The threat was delivered like she was discussing landscaping options. Professional and cold. She stood, smoothing her skirt with manicured hands. "You have until noon to accept my generous offer. After that, I make some calls. The kind where dispatch takes things very seriously. The kind that ruin lives, even when nothing is found." At the door, she paused for her final performance. "Your federal background is impressive, but this is my town. I've built relationships here for 20 years. The police chief comes to my Christmas parties. The mayor's daughter interned at my company. Even judges owe me favors. Think very carefully about your next move." The door closed with a soft click. but her threat lingered like perfume in the air. I immediately backed up the recording to multiple cloud services, then called Robert Matthews. "She just threatened to plant evidence and make false reports," I told him. "Perfect," he said. "Let her. Every crime she commits strengthens our case. When she calls 911, don't resist. Let the evidence speak." At 11:55 a.m., I sent a one-word text, "No." I settled into my home office, where I could monitor all security cameras, waiting. At 12:10 p.m., my phone showed an incoming call from dispatch that I let go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, the sirens started. 3 patrol cars arrived in full emergency mode, officers emerging with hands positioned near weapons, exactly the response you'd expect for the type of call Cynthia had made. Through my window, I could see her white Mercedes parked down the street with a perfect view of the show she'd orchestrated. I stepped onto my porch with deliberate calm, hands visible and empty. "We received a call about a violent disturbance," Sergeant Williams announced, his voice tight with adrenaline. "Possible shots fired. Immediate threat. Sir, step back from the house." "There's been no disturbance, Sergeant," I said, keeping my voice steady and clear. "But you'll want to check when that call came in and who made it. I'm Vincent Harrington, retired federal financial crimes investigator." I slowly reached for my wallet, producing my credentials. "I've been documenting harassment from Cynthia Wellington. She was here this morning, threatening to make false reports if I didn't pay her off. I have everything recorded." Williams exchanged glances with his partner, the tension shifting. "You have recordings of threats to make false reports." I nodded toward my security cameras. "I have continuous footage of the last 4 hours. Nothing has happened here except her visit this morning. Your dispatch should show the call came in about 15 minutes ago." Williams spoke into his radio, then listened to the response. His expression darkened with each word. "Dispatch confirms. Call at 12:10 p.m. claiming screaming, violence, possible gunfire." He looked at me with new understanding. "Can you show me this morning's footage?" I pulled up the video on my phone, showing Cynthia's arrival and departure. The timestamp clear. The street had begun filling with neighbors drawn by the police presence, including Harrison from the HOA board and several others I recognized from the meeting. They watched as Williams reviewed the evidence, his professional composure cracking into visible anger at being used as a weapon in a personal dispute. Cynthia approached with manufactured concern, wringing her hands in practiced distress. "Thank God you're here. Officers." The sounds from that house were terrifying. I was so frightened for everyone's safety. Williams held up a hand to stop her performance. "Ma'am, we have video showing no disturbance at this address for the past 4 hours. We need to discuss your 911 call." The color drained from her face as she realized the trap she'd walked into. "There must be some mistake. I clearly heard." Her voice trailed off as I raised my phone. "Would you like to hear our conversation from this morning?" "Sergeant, the part where Mrs. Wellington threatened to make false reports." Williams nodded grimly. "I played just enough audio to establish the threat." Cynthia's voice crystal clear. "After that, I make some calls, the kind where dispatch takes things very seriously." The gathered crowd gasped collectively. Several phones appeared, recording Cynthia's humiliation in real time. Her carefully constructed image crumbled as neighbors whispered to each other, years of silent resentment finally finding voice. "Mrs. Wellington, you're under arrest for filing a false police report," Williams announced, producing handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent." She stumbled backward, her composure finally cracking completely. "You can't do this." "I'm the HOA president. I have connections." The situation exploded when Bradley's Mercedes screeched around the corner, music blasting. He leaped out, took in the scene of his mother in handcuffs, and charged forward with 24 years of entitlement boiling over. "Get your hands off her!" His shove sent Williams stumbling backward into his patrol car. 2 officers immediately converged on Bradley, professional training taking over as they restrained him with practiced efficiency. "That's assault on an officer," Williams said, straightening his uniform. "You're under arrest, too." The mighty Wellington family was loaded into separate patrol cars, while the neighborhood they'd terrorized for years watched in stunned silence. As the patrol cars pulled away, the crowd began to disperse, but not before several neighbors approached me. Harrison spoke for the group. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. We have a lot to discuss about how this HOA has been run." "Some?" Others nodded, finally free to speak after years of intimidation. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from neighbors. Reporters who'd already caught wind of the story, and numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored them all, walking back to my garage to look at the vandalized Lamborghini still covered in protective film. Tomorrow, the repair shop will begin restoration. Tonight, I'd sleep without wondering what new harassment would arrive with the morning mail. The security cameras would keep recording, but for the first time in weeks, they'd only capture the quiet suburban night that I'd moved here to find. Justice had been served not in a courtroom, but on a sidewalk, witnessed by the very community Cynthia had used as her power base. The empire she'd built on fear had collapsed with a single phone call, the one she'd made herself. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that follows a storm. The emergency HOA board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m., but I had work to do first. At 7:30 a.m., Robert Matthews arrived at my house with 2 junior associates and boxes of legal documents. "The Wellington arrest made the morning news," he said, setting up his laptop on my dining table. "3 other law firms have already called, offering to join a class action against the HOA. Apparently, Cynthia has quite a history." We spent the next hour organizing evidence, the vandalism documentation, false violations, recorded threats, and the 911 incident. Each piece fit into a larger pattern of corruption that would make any prosecutor salivate. The community center was packed when we arrived at 8:50 a.m. Every seat was filled, with people standing along the walls. The remaining 4 HOA board members sat at the front table, looking shell-shocked. Harrison had assumed temporary leadership, his weathered face grave. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to address the crisis in leadership and multiple legal issues facing our association," he began. The crowd stirred with anticipation. I noticed several news crews setting up cameras in the back, their presence indicating how far the story had already spread. What had started as a dispute over a car had exposed a web of corruption affecting hundreds of homeowners. Robert stood to address the board, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Mr. Matthews, representing Vincent Harrington and potentially other affected homeowners, we're prepared to file charges including racketeering, embezzlement, fraud, and civil rights violations. Our preliminary investigation shows Mrs. Wellington used HOA funds for personal legal settlements, created false violations to drive out homeowners, and maintained illegal business partnerships with board members." He placed a thick folder on the table. "This contains evidence of 37 fraudulent fines, 12 forced home sales, and misappropriation of over $200,000 in HOA funds. We can proceed with criminal charges, or the board can cooperate fully with restitution and reform." The crowd erupted. People stood up, sharing their own stories of harassment, illegal fines, and intimidation. Margaret Thompson, an elderly widow, told how Cynthia had tried to force her to sell after her husband died, claiming the property wasn't being maintained to standards. The Patel family revealed they'd been fined for cultural decorations during Diwali, violations that didn't exist in any bylaws. For 20 minutes, the testimonies poured out, years of suppressed grievances finally finding voice. Harrison finally called for order. "The board moves to immediately suspend all questionable fines pending review, open a forensic audit of HOA finances, and cooperate fully with law enforcement." The vote was unanimous. But the real drama was happening outside the meeting. Through the window, I watched a black town car arrive. Cynthia had made bail and appeared with her lawyer, a sharp-dressed man who looked like he'd stepped out of a legal thriller. They pushed through the crowd of reporters, Cynthia's face set in defiant lines. She burst through the community center doors like an avenging angel. "This illegal meeting is void," she announced. "I'm still president until formally removed. Everyone here is trespassing." Her lawyer nodded supportively, but I could see his discomfort as he took in the packed room and rolling cameras. This wasn't the easy intimidation case he'd been hired for. "Mrs. Wellington, you've been arrested for false reporting," Harrison said calmly. "The board has voted to suspend you pending criminal proceedings." Cynthia's laugh was brittle. "You can't suspend me based on false accusations. Vincent Harrington manipulated that recording. He's a disgraced federal agent who was forced to retire." "Oh yes," she said, turning to the crowd. "I've done my research. Ask him why he really left the bureau." The room turned to look at me. This was her Hail Mary, trying to discredit me with implications. I stood slowly, meeting her gaze. I retired after 20 years of distinguished service to care for my dying wife. My record is public, unlike your sealed lawsuits and hidden financial dealings. Robert opened his laptop, projecting documents onto the meeting room screen. Speaking of research, let's discuss Wellington Properties, LLC, which purchased 6 homes in this neighborhood after the owners were driven out by excessive fines, or Wellington Management Services, which received HOA contracts without proper bidding, or the interesting fact that Bradley Wellington is listed as a paid HOA consultant despite having no qualifications except being your son. Each revelation hit like a hammer blow. Cynthia's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear, clearly recognizing the depth of legal exposure. The crowd's mood had shifted from anger to stunned disbelief at the scope of corruption. "You're destroying this community!" Cynthia shrieked, abandoning all pretense of control. "I've protected property values, maintained standards. Without me, this place becomes another suburban slum." Her elitism was finally naked for all to see. "Arrest me? Sue me? I don't care. My connections run deeper than you can imagine. Judges, politicians, people who matter. You think you've won something here? I'll bury all of you in legal fees. I'll make your lives hell until you beg me to come back." Her lawyer grabbed her arm, trying to stop the self-destruction, but she shook him off. The cameras captured every word, every threat, every moment of her meltdown. "Mrs. Wellington," a new voice spoke from the doorway. FBI Special Agent Diana Foster held up her credentials. "I'm with the White Collar Crime Division. We've been investigating complaints about HOA fraud in this county. Your arrest yesterday triggered our interest, and Mr. Harrington's former colleagues reached out with some fascinating information." The color drained from Cynthia's face. Federal investigation meant real prison time, not county jail. "We'll be seizing all HOA financial records and computers today. I suggest you contact a federal defense attorney." Cynthia's local lawyer was already backing away, clearly not equipped for federal charges. The meeting dissolved into chaos as FBI agents began securing documents. Cynthia was escorted out, her empire crumbling in real time. Bradley was nowhere to be seen, having apparently abandoned his mother once federal agents appeared. Smart boy, but too late. The vandalism charges would stick regardless. As the crowd dispersed, neighbors approached me with handshakes and tears. The Patels invited me for dinner. Margaret Thompson hugged me like a grandson. "You did what we were all too scared to do," she said. These people had lived in fear for years, and now they were free. That evening, I stood in my garage with the body shop owner who'd come to collect the Lamborghini. "Hell of a thing," he said, looking at the damaged paint. "Heard that Wellington kid did this. His mother tried to get my shop to inflate repair estimates once for insurance fraud. I refused." Another piece of Cynthia's pattern. As the flatbed pulled away with my car, I felt Emily's presence. She would have loved this. Not the conflict, but the justice. She'd always said I couldn't really retire from fighting corruption, that it was in my blood. As usual, she was right. The HOA would recover, the neighborhood would heal, and somewhere in federal processing, Cynthia Wellington was learning that, in America, nobody really owns a town. They just rent power until someone calls in the lease. The federal courthouse in downtown Charlotte felt like a different world from Willowbrook Estates. 6 months had passed since Cynthia's arrest. 6 months of depositions, evidence gathering, and legal maneuvering. Today was the day of reckoning. I sat in the gallery with Robert Matthews as Cynthia Wellington faced Judge Patricia Hammond on 15 federal counts, including wire fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. Her designer suits had been replaced with conservative courtroom attire, her imperious attitude with calculated humility, but the evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution presented a decade-long pattern of corruption that had netted her over $500,000 through fraudulent HOA operations. Bradley had already pled guilty to felony vandalism, receiving 2 years probation and $30,000 in restitution payments. He sat in the back row, his arrogance replaced with something resembling genuine remorse. During his sentencing, he'd actually apologized, claiming his mother's influence had warped his sense of entitlement. The judge hadn't been entirely convinced, but she'd given him a chance to prove his words through community service and therapy. Watching him now, subdued and silent, I wondered if there was hope for redemption. Time would tell whether his contrition was genuine or just another performance learned from his mother. Cynthia's defense tried everything. They claimed she was a dedicated community leader who'd simply been overzealous. They suggested the HOA board had pressured her into aggressive tactics. They even tried to paint me as a vengeful neighbor with a personal grudge, but the FBI's forensic accountants had done their work. Spreadsheets showed systematic embezzlement. Email chains revealed a conspiracy with complicit board members. The recorded threats and false 911 call were played for the court. When my recording echoed through the courtroom, Cynthia's voice calmly threatening to plant evidence, several jurors visibly recoiled. Her lawyer's shoulders slumped in defeat. The verdict came after just 3 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Judge Hammond's sentencing was swift and severe. Mrs. Wellington, you held a position of trust in your community. You weaponized that trust for personal gain, destroying lives and homes in the process. You corrupted the very systems meant to protect homeowners. The judge paused, letting her words sink in. I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison, 3 years supervised release, and restitution of $750,000 to be distributed among your victims. Cynthia finally broke down, sobbing as the bailiffs approached with handcuffs. The mighty HOA president who'd terrorized a neighborhood was led away in chains. Outside the courthouse, the media waited with cameras and microphones. I gave a brief statement about justice being served and the importance of standing up to corruption, then escaped to my car. The Lamborghini had been fully restored, its pearl blue paint gleaming in the afternoon sun. As I drove home, I thought about the changes in Willowbrook. Harrison led a reformed HOA board that actually served residents instead of exploiting them. The Patels had their Diwali decorations up without fear. Margaret Thompson smiled when she worked in her garden. The neighborhood had healed, becoming what it always should have been, a community instead of a fiefdom. That evening, I parked in my garage and sat in the driver's seat for a moment, running my hands over the steering wheel. Emily would have been proud. Not of the conflict, but of the outcome. Justice served. Corruption exposed. Community restored. My phone buzzed with a message from Bradley Wellington. Thank you for holding us accountable. I start volunteering at the youth center tomorrow. Maybe I can help kids avoid my mistakes. Maybe there was hope after all. Standing up to bullies isn't easy. It takes courage, preparation, and sometimes the willingness to risk everything. But silence in the face of corruption is complicity. If you're facing similar situations, document everything. Know your rights, and remember that no one is above the law. Share this story if you believe in standing up for justice. Subscribe to hear more about how ordinary people can fight extraordinary corruption, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say to a tyrant is simply no.